The year is 2023. An office in New York City. Glass walls. Keyboards clicking. An editor leans over a desk. He's looking at the final layout for a magazine, a glossy cover story. The headline reads, "The Vance Method: How One Woman's Quiet Revolution is Rewriting the Economics of American Beef." The editor, a man named Harris, squints at a photo caption. It's a picture of a single, perfect black cow, standing in grass up to its belly. The caption is simple: Vance Angus Heifer 8815. One of 40 sold in a private treaty sale. Date, October 17th, 2023. Buyer, Nakagawa Farms, Japan. Total price, $312,000. Harris goes still. He reads the number again. $312,000 for 40 heifers. That's $7,800 a head. For commercial heifers, not show champions. It makes no sense. The market average is maybe $2,500. Maybe. He picks up the phone, calls the journalist who wrote the story. A young man out in Montana. "Is this number right?" he asks. The journalist says, "Yes, it's right." Harris is silent for a moment. How is that possible? The journalist says, "That's the story. She doesn't use brokers. She doesn't use sale barns for her best stock. She has a list, a waiting list, buyers from 3 continents. They pay what she asks, because her genetics are a closed loop. 30 years of data, 30 years of discipline." Harris leans back. He looks at another picture. A woman in her late 50s, weathered face, clear eyes. Her name is Alara Vance. She is standing by a fence post on her ranch. There's a handwritten note from the journalist in the margin. It says, her father died in '93. She was 24. The local cattle broker, a man named Frank Miller, told her to sell the herd and move to town. Told her she couldn't handle it. Told her he wouldn't be the man to help her fail. Harris reads the note twice. He looks back at the sale price, $312,000. He looks at the woman's face, and he understands. This isn't a story about cattle. It's a story about the bill that comes due. This channel tells the stories of people who were told they couldn't, the ones who were counted out, the ones who proved the world wrong, not with a shout, but with a lifetime of quiet, relentless work. If you believe those stories deserve to be told, subscribe to this channel, because the story of Alara Vance is the story of so many others, and we are just getting started. Let me take you back to 1993, a different time, a different world. The air in the valley was thick with the smell of hay and loss. Alara Vance stood on the porch of the house her grandfather built. She was 24 years old. Her father, John Vance, was 2 weeks gone. A heart that just gave out in the middle of a fence line. He left her the land, 480 acres. He left her the debt, a note at the bank for a new swather, $37,000. And he left her the cattle, 112 head of commercial Angus cows. Good cows, but not great. He also left her a journal, a small, leather-bound book filled with his cramped handwriting. Ideas, observations, theories about grass and genetics. Things the other ranchers in the valley called John's Folly. He had started something, a new way of seeing the herd, not as a factory for producing pounds of beef, but as a living system, connected to the soil, connected to the water. He believed the answers weren't in the feed bunk, they were in the bloodline, and in the dirt. Alara read the journals every night, her father's voice on every page. The market wants fast growth. The land wants patience. Listen to the land. A good bull is half your herd. A great bull is your future. He had circled a name, a bull in a catalog from a breeder in Nebraska. Rito 707 of Ideal 3407. A legend. His semen was expensive. A live bull was impossible. But John Vance had written a note. This is the key. This bloodline changes everything. Ilara knew what she had to do. She had to continue his work. It was the only thing that felt real, the only thing that mattered. She made an appointment with the most respected man in the Valley's cattle business, Frank Miller. Frank had been the broker for every major ranch in the county for 40 years. He'd worked with Ilara's grandfather. He'd worked with her father. He was a pillar of the community, coached Little League, served on the hospital board. He had a deep, calming voice, and eyes that had seen every kind of trouble a rancher could face. He was a good man. Everyone said so, and that is the most important part of this story. Frank Miller was a good man. She walked into his office on a Tuesday morning. The room smelled of old leather and coffee, plaques on the wall. Sale of the year, 1978. Sale of the year, 1985. A picture of him with the governor. He stood up when she came in, gave her a sad, kind smile. Ilara, I am so sorry about your father. He was a fine man, a fine cattleman. She nodded. Thank you, Frank. She sat in the chair opposite his big oak desk. She felt small. She explained her plan. She wanted to keep the ranch. She wanted to improve the herd. She wanted to pivot to genetics. She wanted to buy a bull, a very specific bull, or, at least, secure a line of credit to buy the best genetics she could afford. She needed his help. His name on the loan would mean everything at the bank. His connections could get her the stock she needed. Frank listened. He steepled his fingers. He didn't interrupt. When she was finished, he was quiet for a long time. He sighed, a deep, paternal sigh. Ilara, he said, your father was my friend. I've known you since you were born. I'm going to talk to you the way he would have. He leaned forward. This is a tough business. It's tough for men who have been doing it their whole lives. It's no place for a young woman on her own. Especially now. Prices are down. Costs are up. This genetics business, it's a gamble. It takes years. It takes deep pockets. You have a mortgage. You have a swather note. You have 112 mouths to feed. Ilara started to speak, but my father believed. He held up a hand, gently. Your father was a dreamer, honey. God bless him for it. But dreams don't pay the bank. He leaned back in his chair. Here is what you do. You let me sell the herd for you, the whole lot. I can get you a fair price, a good price. We pay off the bank, we pay off the swather. You walk away with a good piece of cash in your pocket, 100,000, maybe more. You sell the land or lease it out. You take that money, you move to town, you get a house. Go back to school if you want. Find a good husband. Start a life. A safe life. He smiled, a kind, reassuring smile. I will not be the man who helps you lose your father's legacy. I will not co-sign a loan that I know will sink you. I owe your father that much. I'm doing this to protect you. The room was silent. The clock on the wall ticked. Ilara looked at him. She saw the certainty in his eyes, the absolute, unshakable conviction. He wasn't being cruel. He wasn't being dismissive. He genuinely believed he was saving her. And in that moment, she felt something colder than anger. It was a feeling of being erased, of her mind, her plan, her father's dying wish, being patted on the head and sent to bed. She stood up. Her hands were steady. Her voice was quiet. "I understand," she said. "Thank you for your time, Frank." She walked out of his office. She did not look back. She got in her father's old Ford truck and drove the 20 miles back to the ranch. The whole way, she didn't cry. She just felt a strange, quiet calm settle over her. A decision had been made, not by her, but for her. And now she had to make another one. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who claimed to have your best interests at heart. Someone who wrapped their doubt in the language of protection. It is the loneliest kind of fight there is, because you cannot fight it with anger. You can only fight it with your life. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to prove someone wrong who thought they were being kind. Because what Alara Vance did next was not a reaction. It was a declaration. She went home. She parked the truck, walked into the kitchen. Her mother was there, sitting at the table, a strong, quiet woman who had weathered 30 years of ranch life. She looked at Alara's face. "Well?" she asked. Alara sat down. "He said no. He said I should sell." Her mother didn't say anything for a long time. She just looked out the window at the rolling hills, at the cattle grazing by the creek. Then she turned back to Alara. She reached across the table and put her hand on her daughter's. "Your father left you the land," she said. "He left you the cattle. But he gave you his mind. That's the one thing they can't take. That's the one thing they can't put a price on. The land knows. The cattle know. You listened to them, not to men in offices. And that was it. That was all that needed to be said." That night, Alara opened the ranch ledgers. She saw the $37,000 debt. She saw the balance in the checking account, $14,210. It wasn't enough. It wasn't close to enough for a world-class bull. It wasn't enough for anything Frank Miller would call a real plan. So she made a different plan, her father's plan, but smaller, smarter. She didn't need to buy the bull. She just needed his blood. She spent $2,000 on a used nitrogen tank. She spent another $3,000 on 20 straws of semen from the bull in the catalog. Rito 707 of Ideal 3407. $150 a straw. An absurd price to everyone else in the valley. A bargain to her. She spent $600 on a 2-day course in artificial insemination at the State University. The only woman in a class of 20 men. They looked at her hands. Small, slender, not the big, rough hands of a cattleman. They muttered to each other. She ignored them. She learned. She came home. The first year was a disaster. She bred 40 cows. Only 10 of them settled. A 25% conception rate. The neighbors talked. Heard that Vance girl is playing vet. Heard she's wasting good money on fancy semen. Heard she'll be broke by winter. Frank Miller drove by the ranch once a week on his way to see other clients. He'd slow down, look at her pastures, shake his head with a sad, knowing look. Poor girl. He was just waiting for the call asking him to come sell the herd. The call never came. The next spring, 10 calves were born. 5 bulls, 5 heifers. They were different. You could see it from the day they hit the ground. Deeper chests, thicker backs. They grew faster than the other calves. On the same grass. From the same mothers. It was the bloodline, just like her father said. That fall, at weaning, her other calves averaged 510 pounds. The 10 AI calves averaged 620 pounds. 110 extra pounds per head. At 80 cents a pound, that was $88 extra per calf. It was a start. It was proof. She kept the 5 heifers. They would be the foundation of her new herd. She sold the 5 bull calves at the local auction. They brought a premium. Men who had laughed at her were bidding on her cattle. She took that money. She bought more semen. And she paid for a correspondence course in soil science. She learned about rotational grazing, moving the cattle frequently, letting the grass recover, letting the roots grow deep. Her father had written about it in his journal. We're not farming cattle, we're farming grass. So she started farming grass. She spent her days moving portable electric fences, a single strand of polywire. The neighbors laughed again. Look at her out there with her toy fences. That little wire won't hold a cow. But it did. The cattle learned. The grass responded. Within 2 years, her pastures were greener in August than her neighbors were in June. Her cows were healthier. Her vet bills dropped by half, then by 75%. She didn't need to worm them as often. The healthy pasture broke the parasite cycle. Her conception rates on the AI program ticked up, 50%, 65%, 70%. Every year she kept the best heifers. Every year she sold the bull calves and the lower-end heifers. She never borrowed another dollar. She paid off the swather note, cash. She paid off the ranch mortgage, cash. The call Frank Miller was waiting for never came. Let me tell you about the next 10 years. Because this is where the story stops being about survival and starts being about dominance. By 1998, 5 years after Frank Miller told her to go home, Ilara's herd was 150 head. All of them carried the Ritos 707 bloodline. Her weaning weights were averaging 680 pounds. The county average was 550. She was getting a premium of 20 cents a pound. She bought a neighboring 160-acre parcel that came up for sale. The owner was retiring. His kids didn't want it. She paid him in full, cash. By 2003, 10 years in, her herd was 250 head. She was selling bred heifers by private treaty. Ranchers were starting to call her, not the neighbors, but ranchers from 2 counties over, men who heard about the Vance cattle. They'd show up, skeptical. She'd show them her numbers, her calving ease scores, her weaning weights, her carcass data from the steers she sold. She didn't talk much. She let the numbers talk. She let the cattle talk. They would walk through her pastures, see the deep grass, see the healthy, uniform cows, and they would write the check. That year, an article appeared in a regional farm paper, The Woman at Willow Creek. It mentioned her rotational grazing. It mentioned her AI program. It didn't mention Frank Miller, but he read it. His son said he left it on the kitchen table for a week, just sitting there. By 2008, 15 years in, the herd was 400 head. She had bought another 640 acres, cash. She was now leasing another 1,000. Her name was known across the state and beyond. She started using embryo transfer, taking the best genetics from her best cows and putting them in her other cows. She was accelerating the process, leapfrogging generations of genetic progress. She hired a young woman from the university to help her, someone with a degree in animal science, someone who saw what Ilara was doing not as a hobby, but as the future. She bought a new John Deere tractor, cash. She bought a new gooseneck trailer, cash. She built a new set of corrals, designed them herself. Low-stress handling. The cattle flowed through them like water. No yelling, no hot shots. Quiet, calm, efficient. Just like her. Frank Miller was semi-retired by now. His son, a young man named Tom, was running the brokerage. Tom was different. He saw the numbers. He understood the data. He drove out to Ilara's ranch one day. He told her, "My dad was wrong. What you've built here is incredible. Let me market your cattle. I can get you into the biggest sales. I can get your name in the big catalogs. We can make a fortune." Ilara listened, just like she had listened to his father 15 years earlier. When he was done, she gave him a small, polite smile. "Thank you, Tom, but I'm doing okay on my own. The market you're selling to is the one my father told me to ignore. I listened to the cattle, and I listened to the land." She was no longer just a rancher. She was a brand. Vance Cattle Company. It stood for something: quality, integrity, data, and a quiet, unshakable refusal to ask for permission. The quiet witness. It's a powerful role in any story. The one who doubts, the one who watches from a distance. For 20 years, Frank Miller was the quiet witness to Ilara Vance's success. He didn't talk about it much, but he saw it. He saw her trucks on the highway, newer, cleaner than his clients' trucks. He saw her name in the paper, not for dead auctions, but for record-setting sales. He heard the talk at the coffee shop. The laughter had stopped years ago. Now it was replaced by a grudging respect, then by outright awe. Did you see the price Ilara got for her steers? Did you see her pastures in that drought last year? Still green. How does she do it? Frank would sit in his booth, sip his coffee, and say nothing. He was a good man, a respected man, but he had been wrong. So completely, fundamentally wrong. And the proof of it was a living, thriving reality just 20 miles down the road. His certainty had been a wall. She had just quietly walked around it and built an empire on the other side. He wrestled with it in the quiet hours of the morning. He had been trying to protect her. He was sure of it. He had been trying to honor his friendship with her father. He was sure of that too. But what if protection is just a prettier word for limitation? What if his idea of safety was her idea of a cage? The thought was deeply unsettling. It called into question not just his judgment in her case, but his judgment in every case. 40 years of telling people what they could and could not do, based on his experience, his certainty. He had lunch with his son Tom one day. Tom was frustrated. "I can't get any of our clients to switch to rotational grazing, Dad. They won't invest in better genetics. They just keep doing what they've always done. And they complain that the margins get thinner every year." Frank looked at his son. "And what about Ilara Vance?" Tom shook his head. "She won't even give me the time of day. She has a waiting list a year long for her bulls. She's getting double the market price for her heifers. She's shipping genetics to Argentina. Argentina, Dad." Frank just nodded. He paid for lunch and walked out. He drove. Not home. He drove out toward Willow Creek. He parked on the county road overlooking her ranch. He saw the patchwork of green pastures, the black cattle moving slowly, peacefully, the neat, orderly buildings. It was a picture of prosperity, of deep, profound competence. He thought back to that day in his office, the young woman with grief in her eyes but steel in her spine. "I will not be the man who helps you lose your father's legacy." That's what he had said. He had been so sure he was the hero of that story, the wise elder saving the child from her own folly. But sitting there, on that dusty road 20 years later, he finally understood. He hadn't been the hero. He had been the dragon. A well-meaning dragon, a kind dragon, but a dragon nonetheless. And the story wasn't about him at all. It was about the woman who had quietly, patiently, and completely slain him. Not with a sword, but with a balance sheet. The reckoning came in the fall of 2018. 25 years after their meeting. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting. Alara's moments were never loud. Frank Miller drove up her lane, an old man now, moving slowly. He got out of his truck and stood by the gate. Alara was in the corral, pregnancy-checking heifers with her assistant. She saw him. She finished with the cow she was working on, wiped her hands, and walked over. "Frank," she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded. "Alara." He looked around, at the corrals, the barns, the healthy cattle. "You've done well," he said. His voice was thin. "I'm doing okay," she said. There was a long silence. The wind blew. A cow bawled in the distance. Frank cleared his throat. "My son, Tom. He's a good boy, but he's struggling. The business is changing. The old ways don't work so well anymore. His best clients? They're losing ground. He needs an edge. He needs better genetics in his clients' herds." Alara just watched him, her face unreadable. He finally looked at her. "I came to ask if you would consider selling Tom a few of your bulls for his top clients, not your best ones. I know you have a list for those. Just some good, solid range bulls. It would help him a lot." Another silence. Alara looked past him, toward the mountains that had been the backdrop of her entire life. She thought about the last 25 years, the cold mornings, the failed inseminations, the neighbors' laughter, the quiet, grinding work of proving a ghost wrong, a kind ghost who thought he was protecting her. Frank shuffled his feet. He said, "I know what you must think of me, but back then, I was just trying to look out for you. I was trying to do what your father would have wanted, to keep you safe, and that was it." The final piece, the justification she had been waiting a quarter-century to hear. She turned her eyes back to him. They were not angry. They were clear, like water. "My father didn't want me to be safe, Frank," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the wind. "He wanted me to be capable. You decided I wasn't." Frank Miller had no answer for that. There was no answer. It was the simple, devastating truth. He had judged her capacity, and in doing so, he had revealed the limits of his own. She looked at the old man, frail, defeated, and she felt not triumph, but a kind of weary sadness. "Tell Tom to call me," she said. "We'll see what we can do." She turned and walked back to the corrals, back to her work. Frank Miller stood there for a long time. He watched her go, the quietest, most complete defeat of his life. He finally got back in his truck and drove away. He never came back. This is the part of the story they don't tell you. Success isn't the victory lap. It's the work that comes after. Legacy is not a monument you build to yourself. It's the foundation you lay for others. Alara Vance never talked about what happened with Frank Miller. She didn't need to. Her actions were her statement. She sold Tom Miller 10 bulls that year, at a fair price, and she gave him a piece of advice. Tell your clients the bulls won't fix a management problem. The genetics are a key, but they have to be willing to turn it. The next year, she formalized something she had been doing for years. She started the Vance Cattle Company Legacy Program. It wasn't a scholarship, it was an apprenticeship. Every year she took on 2 young people, men or women, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they had dirt under their fingernails and a fire in their eyes, and that someone, somewhere, had told them they couldn't. They lived on the ranch for a year. They learned the grazing system. They learned the genetics. They learned how to read a balance sheet. They learned how to weld. They learned that the most important tool on any ranch is a sharp mind. When they left, she didn't give them money. She gave them something more valuable. She gave them 10 bred heifers, the foundation of their own herd, a genetic legacy, a head start she never had. Over the next decade, a dozen new ranches were started across the West, all by graduates of her program. They were the Vance Diaspora. They were running the most profitable, most sustainable cow-calf operations in their regions. They were rewriting the rules, just like she did. They called each other, shared data, shared advice. They were a community, bound by a common philosophy. Listen to the cattle, listen to the land. Her father's words, now a movement. And then came the sale. The one that got the attention of the magazine in New York, the Japanese buyers. They hadn't found her through a broker. They found her through a scientific paper on marbling genetics published by a professor at Kyoto University. The professor had been tracking her bloodlines for a decade, using the public data she made available on her website. He concluded that she had created one of the most consistent lines for high-quality carcass traits outside of Japan. So they came, not to an auction, but to her kitchen table. They drank coffee. They walked the pastures. They looked at her records. Decades of meticulous, handwritten and computerized data. They made an offer. For 40 heifers, the top cut of that year's calf crop. $312,000, wire transfer. She accepted. It was just another business deal. But it was also the closing of a circle that had started 30 years earlier, in a broker's office, with a kind man's gentle refusal. He had told her to go find a nice life in town. She had stayed, and brought the world to her door. Today, if you visit the Vance Ranch, not much seems to have changed. The buildings are neat, the fences are tight, the cattle are calm. Ilara is in her 60s. She still wakes up before the sun. She still pulls on her boots and goes to work. In the ranch office, on a shelf behind her desk, sits a small, worn object. It's a leather-bound journal, her father's journal. Its pages are thin and soft from 1,000 readings. His handwriting, a map of the world she had built. Next to it sits a framed printout, a wire transfer confirmation from a bank in Tokyo. The two artifacts, the dream and the proof, the idea and the result. Sometimes one of the young apprentices will ask her about it, about the beginning, about the stories they hear in town, about the broker who told her no. She doesn't say much. She just taps the journal. The answers are in there, she says. And then she points out the window. And out there, the land knows. The cattle know. That's all that has ever mattered. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Certainty delivered with kindness is more damaging than outright hostility, because it cannot be fought with anger. It cannot be argued with. It can only be disproven, with decades of quiet, relentless work, with a life lived as a rebuttal. Right now, somewhere in the world, a young person with a new idea is being told to be realistic, to be safe, to sell the herd and move to town. They are being told no by someone who thinks they are being kind. This story is for them. Your legacy will not be defined by the doors they close. It will be defined by the world you build without their permission. If this story means something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is fighting their own quiet fight. Someone who needs to be reminded that the most powerful response to doubt is a well-lived life. Subscribe for more stories of the ones who were told no. And in the comments below, tell us about a time you chose to be capable when someone else just wanted you to be safe. Thank you for listening.